the 10-day extension given to mail-in ballots for overseas voters. So could this potentially create a problem of voter fraud? Here now to weigh in is former U.S. Attorney and South Florida lawyer Kendall Coffey. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Heather.
So what about those mail-in ballots and the irregularities? What's your take on it?
Well, I think mail-in ballots always are more susceptible to fraud or other irregularities. When people are inside the polling booths, the system's secure. They go in by themselves, and we have a high degree of confidence that they're going to vote their own votes, and the system works in that context. Mail-in ballots make it more complicated, but what's going to be really interesting to watch is if the federal judge determines to extend the time for voters to correct their mail-in ballots, their absentee ballots or provisional ballots. How is that process going to work logistically? How do they get notified? Do campaign workers become involved and contact them and re-delivering ballots which supposedly have been corrected? That part of the process not only needs to be analyzed in terms of fairness, but also whether there's any risk of fraud tainting the gathering of ballots that are apparently might be corrected. And
would it be possible to even go about that and determine if everything is being handled fairly and correctly if we get to that point?
I think the logistics are daunting, and it's going to require not only people getting the ballots, but somebody making sure that the process is handled honestly. Years ago, I handled a case involving absentee ballots. It was determined that there was systematic fraud in the collection of absentee ballots. So we all know that those kind of ballots are in the highest category of risk for fraud.
Here's what the Florida State Department General Counsel Bradley McVeigh had to say in terms of these ballot irregularities. He said altering a form in a manner that provides the incorrect date for a voter to cure a defect imposes a burden on the voter significant enough to frustrate the voter's ability to vote. And then we heard earlier at the very top of our show, Griff Jenkins, who spoke to Brenda Snipes, the Broward County Supervisor of Elections there. She says that it is good, it's a good point to note that she should have alerted the Secretary of State about altered times on documents.
Well, and that's part of the process, too, is getting all the information available as to whether there are any irregularities or fraud, getting that information to the Secretary of State, which oversees the Division of Elections, so that they can have a broad picture of what's happening. And sometimes it doesn't include any fraudulent votes being received this time, but we're always trying in Florida to make it better for next time because, heck, we're tired of getting into all these voting controversies every few years.
Yeah, you would think at some point you realize we're always hearing about Florida. As Florida races toward the recount deadline, could more key legal battles play out? What legal recourse do the losers have in this as well?
Well, the biggest battle that I see right now in terms of anything that could change the number of votes coming in is whether the thousands of votes where they don't have a valid signature match, whether there's a process to allow those voters to basically correct it or fix it. That could add a few thousands, but the statistics show it may be equally divided among Republican and Democrats, so maybe no net gain. The big issue is going to be, as we go forward in the recount, Broward County, 25,000 undervotes. Was that ballot design, or was it markings made by voters that can be recovered through a manual recount process? And then at the end of all this, Heather, we recall from 18 years ago, any party that loses an election has a chance to bring an election contest under Florida statutes. That requires a lot of proof of irregularity, and there's no indication so far that anyone is thinking in that direction. But this is Florida. Anything's possible. So 10 days after the elections are certified, we'll find out if there are going to be any additional litigations brought to challenge those results.
Should Brenda Snipes keep her job?
I think Brenda Snipes is looking at concluding her career. No one on the Democratic side thinks she's really corrupt, but a lot of people think it's time for her to move on.
All right. Kendall Coffey joining